Hey guys, I'm Mr. Buckwheat and welcome to the next part of the tutorial series on fully automating your Plex server. In this video, I will be discussing download clients. I'm going to show you how to install and configure two clients that I recommend, SABnzbd and qBittorrent. Now, SABnzbd uses NZB files to connect to a usenet network. Now, usenet is one of the oldest computer networking communication systems, dating all the way back to 1979. It started as a platform for academic discussions, kind of like Reddit, and has evolved into a robust file sharing system. Usenet operates on a server client model, where users will connect to a server to download files. Now, this setup ensures high-speed downloads and enhanced privacy since your IP address is only shared with the Usenet provider. Now, on the other hand, qBittorrent uses torrents. It connects via a P2P or peer-to-peer network. And when you download a file via torrents, you're actually downloading pieces of the file for multiple users, known as seeders. This decentralized approach can be very efficient, but it depends heavily on the availability of these seeders. Torrents are generally free to use, but if there aren't enough seeders, download speeds can suffer. Usenet requires a paid subscription, and Usenet generally offers higher speed downloads since you're downloading directly from a server. This isn't affected by the number of users sharing the files since you are only connecting to the server and not to other peers. As for security, Usenet has built-in SSL encryption, which means your downloads are secure and anonymous. This is a significant advantage over torrents, where it's recommended to use a VPN to maintain your privacy and hide your IP address. Now, before we begin, be sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications, as these tutorials are part of a series so you can stay up to date whenever the latest videos are released. I do offer personal help if you're stuck or struggling with following these videos, and I also offer a service if you would rather just have someone do it for you so you can sit back and relax. You can reach out to me via Discord at Mr. Buckwheat, or you can email me at info@mrbuckwheat.com. Now let's switch over to our testing environment. All right, so here we are on the desktop of my QNAP, and I'm going to start up our virtual machine here. So this will be our testing environment running Ubuntu. And I actually just updated this from 2204 LTS to the new 2404 LTS. And testing so far seems that everything's working as normal. Everything transferred over. So I'm going to give you guys the okay to update if you haven't already, or you're looking to pull the trigger on this, as this update literally just came out. The official version, at least, came out today on the 29th. So let's start this up, and you'll see that the desktop is a little bit different because, again, we are running the latest version of Ubuntu now. So if we go to About here, you're going to see the latest update. We're on 2404.1. All right, so this is the same environment that I was using in the previous videos. Again, we have two scenarios. So scenario one would be housing the media all on one device with Ubuntu installed. And scenario two would be using a host with Ubuntu installed and secondary devices, whether that's a external hard drive or a NAS with everything stored on that NAS, your movies, TV shows, etc. So here's scenario one. We got media with our movies and TV show folders, and I only have one movie and one TV show in there for scenario one. And then scenario two would be if we had our mount paths. And again, these still are the same. So I have the NFS folder here, and that's connected to, in this case, this would be, my NAS. So this is the QNAP NAS, the host machine, that houses all my movies, TV shows. As you can see, this is the main folder here as this is loading. Actually, let's go to the test folder. Yep. Because this is a lot less files on here. I only have 2 movies and 2 TV shows on here. So that's, again, scenario 2. Okay, so we're going to be talking about 2 programs here. The first is SABnzbd. This will be your Usenet manager. So this will handle all downloads via Usenet. And the second will be qBittorrent. qBittorrent will be handling all your torrent files. So the programs that we're going to, or the versions that we're actually going to be using are based off of the Linux server .io. So if we start with SABnzb, we'll just click on this link. This will bring us to the GitHub page. This has all the instructions on how to install it. Goes over the versions, the application setup, as well as the Docker Compose file, which is what we're going to be looking at specifically to grab all that information to plug into Portainer so that we have everything set up and configured correctly. So In order to access Portainer, we're going to be using that same IP address, my 192.168.1.34. So that's the IP address of the virtual machine. And we want to make sure that we use port 9443. It's the same port we used to configure Portainer in the previous videos. And it does require an HTTPS connection. So we have to make sure we type in HTTPS in the beginning of this link. And that'll bring us right into Portainer. And as you can see again, same instance, we had the 6 containers running: Plex, Portainer, Prowler, Radarr, Sonarr, and Watchtower, all up to date, all working and ready to go. Okay, so what we're going to be doing here is we're going to click on that button again, add container, and we're going to be copying the information right here. So the first thing that we're going to be looking at for SABnzbd is the image location or the image link. So I'm going to use the one that's listed right here in the compose file. We're going to paste that right here into Portainer, and I'm going to give this a name as well. So we'll call this SABnzbd, and we're going to add a couple of ports here, or really just one port. The main one that we need here is going to be port 8080. That's what the default is set as, but we're actually going to be using on this, or in case you can't use port 8080, you can change it to something else, whether it's port 8888. That's the nice part with the Portainer instance. Now I already have something running on port 80 or port 8080. So what I'm actually going to do is make this port 8888, and I'm still going to keep the container 8080 because that's what it's set as default. This is again just a pointer address from outside the container accessing this on port, or excuse me, via the IP address 192.168.1.34. That's the IP address of this virtual machine. So now that that's configured, we're not going to use anything for the commands and logging, but we are going to mount a couple of things here. So I'm going to use 3 paths here. The first one will be in the container, will be the /config. And again, we're just pulling exactly what's listed on here. So we have our main config, but really for these 2 optional ones, you're not going to be using these. You're going to be using that main media folder, the same that we did in the other containers, like Sonarr and Radarr. So if we were to just kind of look at what those were set up as, and again, we have these listed, or these tutorials are listed in the previous videos as well. You'll notice I have, my main config here, as well as we did scenario 1, which is everything stored on the NAS. And then scenario 2 would be acting as a host connected to secondary devices. So we're going to do both of these so that way you guys can see exactly how to set this up. So we can actually copy, because we're using this same one here. We can copy this path because that's our /media path, and we can paste this. Make sure to select bind. We can paste this right here, and we'll give this the name as well, /media. So that way this container will see a folder inside labeled as /media that points to this on our host machine. And the same thing for this. We're going to actually do /media, but this will be the NFS mount. And we're going to keep this as a volume. And remember, we already mounted this already in Portainer, so I have that as a drop down to make it nice and easy for me. In terms of the configuration folder, that's going to be on our container / in this case, SABnzbd. That's where we're going to store all the configuration files and settings on the Ubuntu virtual machine. Under network, we're going to select external. That was our default that we had set up in the previous videos as well. And the environment, we're going to have a couple of tabs here. So in this case, we're going to add 3. And again, just copying what's here under the environment tabs, we have our user IDs and our time zone. So under this, we're going to type in PUID. And for my instance, it's a setting, or the value is entered as 1000. My PGID, we're going to use 0 for admin. And our time zone, my time zone is America /New York. For labels, we're not going to need anything there. For restart policy, we're going to set this as unless stopped. Runtime and resources, we don't need anything there. And finally, if you notice here, really there's nothing else. So this looks like it's okay to deploy. So we're going to actually hit save and deploy the container. This will pull the latest image. As this is getting pulled, we're going to head over to this link. Once this finalizes, we'll make sure that this is working. So if we click here on our hyperlink and go to our IP address under port 8888, you can see we're greeted with the quick start wizard. So we are good to go. This is ready to go. Let's switch over to qBittorrent. Now it's going to be the same thing here, but one thing I do want to kind of point out, depending on if you're using private trackers or any type of, seed, whatever case may be, some actually require you to use a specific version of torrenting, because torrenting is on a different network that uses a peer-to-peer network. So those trackers are, unfortunately, they're not able, you cannot access those private trackers using a VPN. Some settings or some sites are very strict on that, and they'll go into detail on what version of qBittorrent they allow. So just kind of keep that in mind, because if you use this latest tag when you're downloading the image, you're getting the most up-to-date version. SABnzbd, it doesn't matter. The usenet network is encrypted on its own. It's private. It's a different animal. But the torrenting, that's something that obviously, ISPs are kind of cracking down on now, which is why you hear a lot of people saying, well, install qBittorrent and make sure you have a VPN setup. That's kind of what they're talking about here. They want to make sure that your IP address is anonymous when it comes to, the traffic that you're conducting or the traffic that you're sending across the network, because people are snooping. ISPs are cracking down. They're sending, copyright and infringement notices. And obviously you want to make sure that, your internet doesn't get shut off because you're doing something, quote unquote, illegal by downloading a file across of a peer-to-peer network. So that's, it's bad. Don't do that. So that's what you're going to do, is just kind of keep in mind with this latest tag. For this instance, we're going to keep the latest tag on here. So again, we're going to click on this link at the top. That'll bring us to the GitHub page. I just like using the GitHub because I'm used to GitHub. And we're going to be looking for the Docker Compose file here because that has all the information. So a couple of things I just want to point out. Again, here's the image that we're going to be copying. So that's the location. So if we go over to Portainer, we do the same thing now. We're going to add a container. This one will be qBittorrent. And we're going to copy or paste that link right in here. So here's the latest version. Couple of ports we're going to need. And again, just copying what's over here for, that's SAB. Let's go over to qBittorrent. Close that out. So you'll notice for the ports, again, they have a default port of 8080. That's okay. As long as we set a different port, this doesn't matter. But one thing that you're going to notice here is they actually have a default port of 6881. That's the torrenting port that they use as the default. And you can change this in your settings, but this is basically going to be the port that you're going to open up on your router and establish a port forwarding rule. And it's very important that you do that because whatever port that you set it to has to match. You can keep the default here as 6881. You could change that to, 34343, whatever you want. For this instance, we're going to keep this as the default. So 6881 will be the default torrenting port, but we're going to change the web UI port to something else. In this case, we're going to do 8889. And that way, qBittorrent as well as SABnzbd are right next to each other just for organizational purposes. So if we head over to Portainer now, we're going to use that default port. So we're going to do 8889. And we're still going to keep the same port as 8080 as the internal port. And then we're going to use, again, this default port here of 6881. So I'm just going to type that in here, 6881 and 6881. I'm going to do it again, 6881 and 6881. But this time I'm going to choose the UDP setting here on the bottom. So that should be good. We have the ports configured. Now, if we head back over here, we want to look at the environmental variables that are set up here. So there's a couple here. So we're going to, again, showing you guys a shortcut. You can actually copy these right here. And if we go back into Portainer under our environments tab, there's an advanced mode here. Again, just kind of showing you guys all the tips and tricks of the trade. You can copy those right in here. Make sure you just have the value set up like this. It's got to read PUID. Oh. But if you were to kind of paste and copy that right in there, this would be fine. Granted, we want to set this to 0, and we're going to change the time zone /New York. So this will work just fine too. And if we click on simple mode, you'll see that these fields are automatically populated right in here. So that's good to go. Now you'll see that the web port UI is still under 8080. That's again, it's using this default here. Now let's just say you wanted to make these two numbers match. I can change this value here and let's do 8889. Just make sure that you enter this value here under 8889 as well. So that way it matches. So whatever value you're putting in here has to match the container value, because that's basically what this environmental variable is saying. It's saying, hey, what port do I want to assign the UI on? You're saying assign it on port 8889. So that way, if it's 8889, it's going to match. And then you're opening up the host port to point to that port. I know that's a lot. It's a lot, but believe me, it's going to work. All right. As for the volumes, we're going to be doing the same thing here. We're going to add the 3 volumes because, again, we're going to be using the main config, and then we're going to use the data folder or our media folder, and I'll have both scenarios set up. So the first one is going to be the /config. So if we go inside the container /config, we're going to bind that to the host path, which is /container/ in this case, qBittorrent. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to call this a media, but on the host path, we're going to copy exactly what we had under here. So this is scenario 1. Remember, everything installed on one device. And if we were doing scenario 2, we could just do our media, and here's our NFS mount. And we're going to select from the drop-down menu, media /NFS. So again, just copying what we had in here. So we have, the 2 scenarios, pasting those right into here to mirror those 2 scenarios. And our network, we're going to change to external. We have our environmental tabs. We don't need any labels. Change the restart policy to unless stopped. Don't need anything with our runtime and resources or capabilities. So again, if we head back over here, you'll notice, nothing extra on here. This is pretty much good to go. The one thing I do want to point out for qBittorrent is when you deploy this, they actually set a default username and password. So we're going to deploy this container. I'm going to show you guys right now, because once this deploys, you need to check the logs, because it's going to give you the password that you need to change. So how do you check the logs? Well, right here in Portainer, the very first icon under the Quick Actions tab is where your logs are. So here's logs. This is inspect, your stats. This is a console session, and this is attaching a console. So the logs are right here. So if you click this little icon right here that looks like, piece of paper, you'll see the logs for when we deployed this. And if you notice right here on the bottom, it says the web UI administrator username is admin. And then the default password is not set. So what they did was they created a default password. In this case, it's that. So we're going to copy this, and we're going to log into qBittorrent now. So if we just hit the back button here and click on this link, 8889, this will bring us to our qBittorrent, and we're going to type admin, and we're going to paste that password that we had, and this should let us log in, and we're good to go. So the very first thing I'm going to do before we begin is I just want to head over to the web UI tab, and we're going to change the current password. So I'm going to enter something that I like, and then I'm going to hit save. That way I don't have to worry about that password, and that's updated. The other thing you could do too is if you wanted, you can change it. Instead of using the admin, you could change the username to something else. Again, for testing purposes, I'm just going to leave it as admin for now. Okay, so now that that's set up, couple of things that we're going to do. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to set up your folders here in qBittorrent. And actually, let's make this a little bit bigger so this way you guys can see, because I know with the text and I'm on a 4K screen, so the last thing I want is you guys not being able to see anything. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the Downloads tab, and we need to configure the default save paths as well as make sure that everything is pointed in the right direction. So remember, when we deployed this container initially for, oh, this is really big now, sorry guys, but for qBittorrent, remember, we told qBittorrent that we have paths inside of, or we're going to establish paths inside of this Docker application, and it's going to point to specific volumes on our local host. So the main one we're going to be doing, or I'm going to show you guys, is scenario 1. So if you guys have everything installed on one device, you're going to use /media, and to make things easier, let's close these out here. And you're going to use, under here, the default save path, we're going to use /media, and then we're going to use /downloads/complete. What does that mean? So on our instance, that means if we did the main media, meaning it pointed to our one folder, scenario 1, it's going to point to this folder, downloads complete. That's what we want. Meaning when it's done, it goes to this folder. While it's downloading, it's going to go to this incomplete folder. So we just do the same path here. So if we copy this and we paste it under here, well, make sure you check the box, obviously. So we'll delete that and we'll put this in here, and we do incomplete, case sensitive with a capital I. So that's basically saying, okay, anything that's downloading is going to go here. Anything that's done will go to the complete folder, which is what we want. So if we hit save, right, and we go back now to our, let's just go to Radarr for now, we should notice under settings and download clients, we now have the option to add qBittorrent. So if we type in qBittorrent, our local host address, in this case, that's just our local IP address. Oh, let me make sure that that's 3.4. And remember, we put that on port, if you go back here, 8889. So if we enter 8889, we have a username set. So I had admin. The password was the one that I set. And interesting, or one more thing we'll point out, we're going to have to go back to this. We have right now, we have a category set as Radarr. You can make that whatever you want. The default is Radarr, but if you wanted to change this to say movies or, you know, my movie, whatever it is, this is just a label that gets added to the client, whether it's qBittorrent or SABnzbd, and it lets them know, okay, anything that's tagged or uses this category, Radarr for this case, is going to be tied to Radarr, meaning Radarr will watch it and monitor it. When it's done, it'll interact with it, whether it's, you know, moving the file or deleting the download or, you know, a notification that it's done. You want these category tags. And then you have a couple more settings here when it comes to the priority, you know, depending on not whether something's new versus old, you can set it priority so that it downloads first, as well as the initial state. You're going to want to keep that as start. That's fine. And this is the important one, is remove completed. If you have this enabled, that's what we were just talking about before, provided that you have the tag set up, Radarr will now interact with qBittorrent and handle everything automatically. So again, what we want to make sure is that we have that tag or categories. So under categories, what we're going to do now here is we're going to add a category, and we're going to label this Radarr. And we can just hit add on there. So that's fine. So now if we go back into Radarr and hit test, now we got a green check mark. We are good to go. We'll hit save. Oh, and I just turned on the advanced tab here just to show you what else is on here in case there's a post import category. So this is important too. Let's just say you want to, you know, for qBittorrent for seeding purposes, you can add a post import category labeled as seating. So what that'll do is that'll actually set a prefix tag or a category tag as, oh, let me add a category here. So let's just say I wanted to move it from the completed folder, and I wanted to maybe move it to downloads, and I had another folder for seating. I could do that as well. So this is kind of, in case like you use private trackers and, they require certain, seating times or ratios. This is like what you could add to make sure that you're following up with those private trackers. So that way you're hitting your quotas and making everyone happy. So we're going to actually add that just for, again, testing purposes. So that way you guys see exactly how that works. So if we go back in here, make sure we hit test again, it pulls the post import category and we can hit save. So now this is enabled. This is good to go. Switching gears over to SABnzbd, I'm going to come back to this because it does require a little bit of setup. And for testing purposes, I do have to enter some credentials here. So I'm going to get this set up first and we'll come right back to this. All right, now that the credentials are entered, I'm greeted with this nice little green, hey, setup is now complete. Let me know that everything's good to go. So you have all the IP addresses that I can access SABnzbd on. The important thing too is we just want to configure this. So again, same thing that we did in qBittorrent. We want to point to the download folder, and there'll be two. There'll be completed and incomplete. So if we click on this, same thing, we can actually browse and we'll see here are two scenarios. So here's media and here's media NFS. So media is scenario 1. Media NFS is scenario 2, meaning you have, a secondary device, an external hard drive, whatever case may be. So for this, I'm going to use scenario 2, and that way you guys can see exactly how that is. So in scenario 2, I have my test folder, I have media, and then I have a downloads folder. Inside that, I have a complete and incomplete. So for completed, I'm going to select the complete, hit accept. For the temporary download folder, we're going to browse and do the same thing. So media NFS, my testing environment, media, incomplete, and hit accept. So I know this is a little bit long, but for you guys, it's probably going to look just like this. Imagine like what I have highlighted is actually deleted. But for my testing environment, this is again showing you that the internal, the internal workings of Docker are fantastic, because provided that you keep everything organized with the same, /media folder, and you mount those paths inside these containers, you'll have access to everything. You just tell the container while you're inside of it where you want to go versus doing it the other way inside the actual, when you're actually deploying the container. Much easier to do it this way. All right, so that's good. We'll hit save changes. We're good to go on that. So if we head over to Radarr now, let's add SABnzbd. Same thing. We're going to change the host to 192.168.1.34. Again, on this, we used port 8888. So we're going to type that in here, 8888. As for the URL base, we can skip over that. Now the API key is going to be important. We're going to need that. So how do we get that? We head back over to SABnzbd, click on general, we'll scroll down a little bit. You're going to copy this API key right here. So hit Control C, head back over to Radarr and hit Control V, paste that in. Now, if I just run a quick test, you'll notice that I need to add that category movies. Same thing that we did with qBittorrent. This is just basically letting Radarr know, hey, monitor a category called movies. Anything that's tagged with the category movie is going to be for Radarr. And we'll do the same thing for Sonarr. We'll have a category for TV. So if we go back in here now, we're going to switch over to categories. And you'll notice there is a movies category. So what we can do here is we're going to set up a couple of things. We're going to change the movies category. We're going to use default, but we are going to select plus delete on here. The reason why we want that is we want all the processing and everything to be handled. And for the, all we have to do now is just hit on the right-hand side, hit save. Now, if we go back in here and hit test again, we're good to go. We hit save on that category. We can do the same thing for TV, actually. Let's get those set up as well. And we'll hit delete and hit save. So now those categories are set up for Sonarr as well. So if we go down here again, we want to make sure that completed download handling are enabled for both of these options here. That's basically tells Radarr like, hey, you have complete control over handling the downloads and doing everything. And we'll do one last test and hit save. And if you notice now, if I zoom out a little bit here, where we did have those errors, they're gone now. So this is basically configured and ready to go. So I'm going to set up a little bit of a test here to show you guys exactly how this will work. All right, so we have a test file here. Now, before we finish this, what I want to go over are the settings for SABnzbd. So we're going to click this little cog icon here in the top right corner. This will bring us to the configuration tab. And I'm just going to tell you exactly what I have set up here for my instance. We're going to enter these live as we kind of copy paste my current system into this new instance of what I just started. So the first thing you're going to want to do here in the top right corner, you're going to check this box for advanced settings. There'll be a couple of things that we can configure here, mainly the look and feel of things in the general tab here. You'll have like the web interface. You can change it to night mode, light mode, whatever you want. Hit save. As for the security settings, what I recommend doing is at least putting in a username and password here. So whether that's, Mr. Buckwheat or your username or an email address, set like a decent password. Right now I have this set as no access, meaning nobody can get access to the stuff outside of the local network. The reason why I'm going to keep this as no access for now instead of actually setting up external access is because in future videos, we're going to cover how to set everything up via proxy, as well as tying things into those third-party sites. So let's just say your indexer has some type of API request that you can, anything that you're monitoring, or if you want to send the NZB file straight into SABnzbd, you can do that. So you can grant certain indexers access to this, but again, that requires setting everything up and adding a layer of security, and we're not ready for that just yet. So for now, we're going to disable this. We're not going to have any external access, and that'll help, keep a layer of protection as we we'll install some type of, stronger security system other than just this kind of basic, the basic one that SAB includes. So that way we get a little bit more protection. But for the most important thing is you want to scroll down here to tuning. And the reason why you want to edit this value is this is going to be the download speeds of your internet provider. So run a speed test, speedtest.net, Google speed test, whatever it is, whatever that number is. And keep in mind, you want to make sure that it is megabytes per second. So again, whatever the maximum speed is, I enter that value here, and then I set the percentage around 90. That way you have a little bit of like wiggle room in case you are downloading or doing a lot. You don't wind up like kind of completely crashing everything out in case you need to do something else, whatever it may be. Kids are watching a movie, things like that. You're not completely using up your entire bandwidth. As for the cache limit, you could set this as the default for 1G. Really depends on how much RAM you have. For my system, I have 32 gigabytes of RAM, so I can actually boost this up to 4G. That'll just help performance a little bit better. Remember to click Save Changes here. That'll keep everything set up, keep everything saved that we just changed and edited here. If we head over to the Folders tab, we had this set up when we did the actual initialization. But one more thing that you guys may want to add here is under this permissions for completed downloads, you can type in 777. That'll get rid of any permission issues. Now we have everything set up and configured via, the NFS mounts, and we're using ourselves, which is considered an admin account. So you shouldn't have problems, but I would still just enter this value anyway, just in case for some reason there may be a problem. This will fix that. Again, once we're done, we're going to click on Save Changes. Everything here under the system folders, you can keep that the same. For the servers, that's pretty much where you, I'll go back to this. I'm going to block this out anyway, but this is where you have like your server, and it gives you a little bit of details of what you can do, whether, you know, you want to take a look at how many connections you have, if you want to edit those, if you want to add, you know, if you want to purchasing multiple servers. I just set up, again, this is a testing environment. I just threw one of mine in here, and you can see exactly all the statistics of what we just did. So again, we're downloading one thing right now, just again for testing purposes. Heading over to categories, this is where you have everything set up for all your ARR apps. So for right now, we have movies and TV. We'll set up audio as well as Radarr, any of those things. If you have another instance of, you know, Radarr in 4K, or if you do Sonarr in 4K, whatever it may be, this is how you enter all those additional categories so that individual app can monitor everything. If we head over to switches, this is just kind of a couple of things. Most of the stuff I'm going to leave as default, but the one thing that you're going to want to maybe just check out here are a couple of the queue settings. So the ones that I have is, and again, we're just kind of going down the list here. Make sure you have the advanced settings checked off. We're going to leave the maximum retries as default. For the only get articles for the top of the queue, we're going to enable that. Abort jobs that cannot be completed. We want to keep these settings for identical download detection for off. Smart duplicate off as well. We want to allow proper releases. For an action when encrypted RAR is downloaded, we're going to change this to fail job. Scrolling down for the unwanted extensions, we are going to blacklist a specific file or extension. In this case, it's going to be M2TS. That way, anything that possibly is grabbed by our NZBs that have this extension at the end of it. Sometimes, you know, there may be a mislabel, whatever the case may be. This is automatically going to blacklist that, so we don't have, because Plex doesn't handle M2TS extensions, so we don't want those. When action when unwanted extension detected, again, we're going to set that to fail job. Automatic sort queue, this is a personal preference. I just have mine set by sort name A to Z. And the one thing you're going to want to also do is click on direct unpack. This will start unpacking during the download to reduce post-processing time. Only works for jobs that do not need repair. So we're going to have that enabled as well. Click on save, and we're going to scroll down here a little bit. We want to enable downloading all part 2 files. We're going to head down to enable SFV-based checks. Uncheck that. Keep on post-process only verified jobs. Enable recursive unpacking. Scrolling down to the bottom here, these are fine. History retention, keep all jobs. Enable folder rename, we want that checked. And then finally, if you do have a quota set up, you can actually enable these settings right here in SABnzbd. Certain providers obviously have, you know, blocks that you can purchase. Some may be unlimited. Depending on which one you use, you can actually kind of monitor all that right here. So again, hit save changes once we're done. We're going to head over to sorting now. I don't have anything in here. This is more of an advanced tab when it comes to sorting specific categories for, you know, a show or a movie folder. I don't use that. Again, Radarr, Sonarr do a great job of managing and taking care of everything. Heading over to notifications. This is really if you want emails on, you know, completions, things like that. I don't have any of this set up. To be honest, I don't need this. I think this might be a little bit overkill. I really don't want to get a notification every time something happens. I have Notifier for that, which is a separate app. So skipping over this, we're going to head over to scheduling. This is kind of cool just in case, let's just say you have any type of server maintenance going on, or you wanted to add a schedule like, hey, you know, I reboot my server every Friday at 7 p.m. Or let's say you're running like a qMeta script. What I do is I actually have qMeta, which is my poster creation tool for Plex, that runs every day at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. So what I do is I actually add a schedule to pause SABnzbd at 6:50. So that way anything that is downloading, it kind of gives it a chance for Plex and everything to like kind of catch up. That way there's not something in the background that's being added and then it winds up getting missed out. So I just kind of, you know, keep the schedule. Plus I do weekly maintenance where I reset my server. So that might be something that you want to do is, you know, again, pausing things. So that way you give a little bit of maintenance for your system to kind of catch up and take a breather. Looking at RSS, this is where you can enter like a specific RSS feed. You know, if you have, again, certain indexers, certain private sites, things like that, give you the ability to kind of import lists so that way they're automatically grabbed. I don't have this or I don't use this or necessarily because, again, we're using Sonarr Radarr to monitor everything for us automatically, so you don't have to worry. But this is how you do that if you did want to import a specific RSS feed. Now, heading over to the special tab, this is kind of important. We're going to go through these. I know this is a little bit extensive, but these are kind of like the advanced configuration settings. And this is what I personally have tested myself and I have set up for my server. So just again, going down the list here, we're going to check these first two boxes, start paused and preserve pause state. Heading down to IPv6, I do not have IPv6, so I'm going to disable those. I'm going to leave fast fail on. We're going to skip this box. We're going to enable the last two here, enable par cleanup, process unpacked par 2. Scrolling down, we want to turn API warnings off. The reason for that is you'll notice when you're using a local network, especially with this Docker, you'll get a lot of like API warnings that may cause false errors. So I just disable that to kind of get rid of that. This is more or less just like when, you know, let's just say if there's a bad connection going on internally. So again, for me, I just shut this off to kind of get rid of all that stuff. Helpful warnings, we're going to keep on. Enable multi-par, unrar, enable 7-zip, file join, TS join, that's fine. Scrolling down, we're going to go to tray icon, that's fine. We want to keep awake. We want to enable new NZB on failure, and we're going to use HTML login. Scrolling down a little bit more, we want enable broadcast. We want warn duplicate jobs, and we want backup for duplicates. We want to enable that as well. And then finally on the bottom here, just click Save Changes. That'll keep everything set. For these values here, the one that you're going to change is, let me just see if I have this one. I don't think it was. All these defaults are okay. Receive threads, I put that up to 4 based on my CPU. Direct unpack 3, that's fine. Self-task sab, the indexer, that's okay. And then for the host whitelist, you can actually enter, if you, again, future purposes, if you wind up using custom domains, this is where you'll whitelist those hosts. So for example, like, you know, if you have the mrbuckwheat.com domain, and I use like, you know, whatever it is for like the SAB or something like that, I can whitelist that so that it adds a check. You could also add the local ranges here. So in this case, the 192.168.1.0/24. So that way, any IP address with this or with this subnet will be whitelisted as well. So again, just hit Save Changes on that, and that's good to go. Finally, for the last, there is like a help tab in case you wanted to get or have a little bit more details on what all those individual settings mean. It'll give you a little description here. Again, I tested most of these, and these are what I found that works best for me. So what we're going to do now is I have my test file here. We're going to do a couple of things, and hopefully we can get this working here. So I'm going to open up a couple tabs so this way you guys can see everything all together. So I'm going to have Radarr and these three guys right here. So let's minimize this. Okay, so let's make this a little bit smaller because we don't need that to be that big. So here's our test file that we're downloading right now. Here is our Radarr instance. Let's refresh this. So if we see the activity, perfect. So that's just saying that it's paused. That means nothing's going on. So here's the history. Yep. Okay, perfect. And we have this. So let's put this down here. So just kind of give you the bird's eye view. And this is basically a test to make sure that this is working. So here is a download right now. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. I'm going to zoom in on here. So that is a 20 gigabyte file. Let's reset and zoom back out. and we're at 98% complete. So what I'm going to basically be doing is checking to make sure all of this is working. So again, since this isn't finished, technically this should be still in our incomplete folder. And remember, we have under the, if you go back here, we have under our Portainer, we're using Radarr, or actually, excuse me, if we go back to SABnzbd, we set the default folder to be using the NFS mount. So if we went back into SABnzbd and we took a look at our folders category, we see that I'm using right now, again, for testing purposes, I'm using scenario 2. So this means that the downloads folder is technically on a secondary device. So we use the media NFS folder. So if we go to the media, oh, and I keep messing around with stuff here. Sorry about that. I want to make that smaller. If we go to the media NFS folder here, so if I go under other locations, I click on Ubuntu, I click on NFS, I click on media, I click my testing environment. Here's my media folder. So inside this downloads folder, I should see inside this incomplete, perfect, and there it is. I have this file that's 98% complete. So you could see here, here's all like the parts of that file. Here's everything that's being downloaded. So what should happen now is when this is done, this should unpack and immediately get moved to this folder. So how do I check that? Simple. I just kind of keep this tab open. I'm going to hit resume here. We're going to let this finish. That has about like 5 seconds here. And let's see if this direct unpacks. Give this a second here. Make this a little bit bigger. Yep. So it's unpacking this right now. We could see the direct unpack 2 out of 82. Oh, it's almost like 4 minutes left. I'm going to come right back to this through the magic of editing. Okay, so this is done. One more thing I want to point out, I forgot about this because again, when we're adding the local ranges here, if we go back into Portainer, one thing you want to also add for the local range is your external network or the IP4 for the external network that we have set up. So this right here, we're going to copy that, head back over to SABnzbd and go under special, scroll down here for local ranges. We're going to hit comma and paste this value right in as well. So this was the local IP range from external record. That just means SAB is going to recognize this as a local network and not require a username and password when it comes to the API request and communicating with Sonarr, Radarr, like that. Make sure that those local ranges are set. Okay, so we're going to hit save changes, head back over to SAB now. We'll minimize this. And if we look at our activity right now, let's hit refresh, go over to settings, and make sure the download clients are connected. Yep, we're good to go. So activity, hit refresh. We'll see Tropic Thunder was literally, I hit refresh on there, just was imported. If I go to complete now, this is already gone. I go to movies now. Let's go up a folder and look at Tropic Thunder. This is an atomic move. This is hard link. So you'll see that that file in literally that split second was instantly transferred to the from the download complete folder straight into the library. I didn't have to recopy this movie. I didn't have to, wait 4 minutes or whatever it is for the entire file to be moved or, copied and then deleted. It was instantaneous. And this is important. And this all ties back again to the how the folders are set up with like media/import. So to test this out too, we can actually go like this. Let's go to Tropic Thunder. We're going to cut this movie here and we're going to put this back in the downloads folder and complete. I'm just going to paste that in there. So if we were to go to import now, again, settings, let's go to activity, history, and let's do a manual import. So if we go, it's under wanted, sorry about that. And we select the folder that we had that houses everything. So in this case, media NFS, We scroll down to our test folder, media, downloads, complete. So we selected that folder. Let's do an interactive import. So this is also how you would, let's say if you had movies already and you wanted to process them with the custom format score, you would basically take the movies and put them into the completed folder and then manually import everything over. So that way the library is basically, you don't have to re-download everything. Or if you, ripped movies, or if you have a Blu-ray ripper, whatever the case may be, you have a collection that you already own, maybe it's on hard drives, you can plug that in and import this so that your library is basically built upon media that you already have. So it's a matter of just putting everything in that completed folder, making sure that the movie's tied to this. So in this case, here's Tropic Thunder, and you'll notice that this has the proper naming structure that we had in the last tutorial from Trash Guides. And then just click import, and you'll see again, when we click on import, we're going to literally, let's move the files now. So we're going to actually do a full on, transfer and moving of the file. And you'll see how this is literally instantaneous. Manually imported the movie. If I refresh this downloads and complete again, the movie's already gone and it's moved directly into my movie folder with the movie there again. So if we were to go to Plex now, and let's just do a quick little scan here, hit scan library, we should see, we're going to make sure that that library is in there, and there it is. There's the new movie that we just added. So we're good to go. Now the same process again applies to qBittorrent. You're going to test it, you're going to, download a file or put a file in there and just kind of monitor it. And then once you see that it's complete, you're going to trace it back to the folders, the incomplete, make sure that it moves to the completed folder, and then hit refresh in either Sonarr and Radarr for that queue, and make sure that that import is instantly grabbed and added to your library. Now, a couple of settings that I do want to go over, and this will be the final part of it because, again, everybody is going to be a little bit different here. But for the VPN options, and again, I want you guys to kind of take this with a little bit of grain of salt here, because using a VPN, and again, 100% protection is not guaranteed. You can take the necessary steps to better your chances of protection, but still at the end of the day, even using a VPN is still not 100% guaranteed, right? So what I recommend is using private trackers. And the reason for that, again, is because private trackers have a better job of monitoring things, whether it be a ranking system or requirements, a paid subscription. So, it's a little bit extra security. It's better than obviously using free trackers or public trackers, because those can be obviously monitored by anyone on the other end, whether that's, an ISP or, Paramount, whatever it is, people that can send you copyright infringement letters. And the last thing obviously you want happening is your service is being canceled. So what I recommend is, do a little bit of research on some VPNs, especially ones that allow port forwarding. That's going to be the key thing you're going to be looking for, as well as they use a SOCKS 5 configuration, because the great thing about using qBittorrent is there's an actual configuration for a proxy server. So provided you use a VPN that has a SOCKS 5 connection, or where they give you a host name with the username and password, you can actually use that information right here. You can enter that right in, and now your qBittorrent has a built-in VPN. And to test that, there is a site called ipleak.net. I'm not going to go to it because it's going to show all my information. Well, I'll go to it to show you exactly what it is. I'm going to blur all this stuff out. But basically, this is how you're able to test to see exactly what's going on with your outside connection. So there's a nice little torrent address detection here. So if you click on this button that says activate, there'll be a magnet link that you can click on and import that right here into qBittorrent via the links in the top left-hand corner. And then if you go back to this page, you'll actually see in real time what IP leak detects your IP address as. And if that IP address is different than the one that's up here, this is your main one. I know it's blurred out, but it's the one in the top on the top here, if that's blurred out, or excuse me, if those two IP addresses are different, that pretty much says, hey, you are connecting via the qBit network or the peer-to-peer network, and your IP address is coming up as something else versus what your actual IP address is. So that's basically an easy way to test that. So as I close this, let's head back over to qBittorrent. So yeah, really what I use in terms of my settings, and again, this is just kind of, what I've tested. It's personal preference. This is what works for me. I usually keep the defaults here based on my internet connection. I have a gig download. So I have a full, basically like fiber optic here download speed. And what I like to keep in terms of the connections, I keep the global at 500, the maximum number of connected connections per torrent at 100. I keep the 20 and the 4. Basically everything is default there. And again, depending on whether or not you're using private trackers, some private trackers may require you to unhide your IP address. So that's the nice part about Docker is you can actually run multiple instances of qBittorrent. So all you would have to do is duplicate this by clicking duplicate right here. And let's just say this is qBittorrent with a VPN. I change a couple of things here in terms of the port mapping. Maybe I put this as 6.2 and 6.2, and then I use, or 6.82, and I put this also as 6.82. This is 6.82, and then I put this on 88.90, right? And we'll do 88.90. Now I can create a duplicate VPN, or excuse me, a duplicate qBittorrent that has the VPN settings that we were looking at in this here enabled or disabled, depending on which one, whatever one you want to do. That's, again, the beauty of running Docker is you can create multiple containers without having to worry about messing anything up. So provided that you update these settings here and you change, obviously, the network, just, or excuse me, the volume path here. Let's just say I changed those qBittorrent, and let's just say like a VPN for the config. Everything else stays the same. All the labels and everything stay the same. And now I can, obviously update this though. If we go into the environmental variables, web UI port, what do I make this? 8890, and we did 886.882. If I were to deploy this container right now, I have a duplicate copy of qBittorrent that I can now use for, let's just say, if it required, or I was accessing public trackers, right? And I wanted to enable the VPN to hide my IP address. I would use this instance. And the same thing goes for adding it into Sonarr. All I would do is go down to the download clients. I would add another qBittorrent, and I would just label this qBittorrent VPN and then enter all the same settings in here as I did in terms of configuring this duplicate, right? It's again, that's the beauty of this is, following this along, it kind of starting to make sense of like, hey, now I understand why I'm using Portainer and all these, because it's so easy to do. I just duplicated that container by literally pressing a button. That's all you have to do. I can't stress enough how easy this is when you get everything set up and it starts working and the synergy comes into play. Now you kind of see everything. All right. Well, anyway, getting off topic here, going back to the settings for qBittorrent. Let's wrap this up. So, again, here's the proxy server. This is where you would enter those settings if you were using public trackers, or you wanted to hide your IP address. You would enter that information here. Going over the speed, this is again, setting like your global rate limits. Just again, if you have a network that requires rate limits to be set or things like that. When it comes to the BitTorrent stuff, I keep all this stuff as default. You have your RSS feed here in case you want to add manual RSS feeds. You can do that. Here's the web UI settings that we had. Again, this is where you would change like the admin username or the password assigned to it. For the advanced section, most of the stuff I keep as default. I don't touch anything in here. And then finally with the, again, the last thing here is the downloads. We want to just kind of make sure that we have those default save paths set up. That's going to be the most important thing. When we set up those connections to both Radarr and Sonarr, they want to make sure that these paths are accessible. And one more thing I do want to point out with the qBittorrent side, under BitTorrent, this tab here, you will have the option for setting your seeding limits. So you can set this right here in case you have any private trackers that require you to seed for X amount of time, you know, whether it's increasing rank, reputation, whatever the case may be, getting bonus points. You know, a lot of private trackers do have that reward system in place. You can edit those or set up those ratios and time limits here. So that way you're not, you know, doing what's called a hit and run. The other alternative is if we go over to Prowlar. So let's open, oh, I did the wrong one here, Prowlar. And here's like a torrent indexer that I use. You can actually edit that right in here. So if you scroll down or you click on the bottom here, this advanced tab, you'll see advanced options that are in yellow orange here. And you could set up these limits here. So you can do not only like query limit or queue limits, grab limits, minimum seeders. You can set all these other parameters. So like say seed time, for example, let's just say you had a seed for, I don't know, like a 1,000 minutes. You can set that in here as well. You can also set a ratio if you want, you know, 1.0. You could change the priority as well here. Again, all these additional factors kind of come into play and work in synergy with the qBittorrent when it comes to like the private stuff, because with those private trackers and whatnot, they are going to have like requirements for you to be able for you to set in place. All right, perfect. So we got the 2 download clients installed, SABnzbd as well as qBittorrent. We did the test to make sure that everything's working correctly, as well as all the folder moves when the downloads are complete. You see how everything works out with that data folder, and everything uses hard links as well as atomic moves. So, you know, files transfer instantaneous. Be sure to comment and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already for any notifications on the future videos that I post, as well as feel free to reach out to me again on Discord at Mr. Buckwheat, or if you want to email me, info@mrbuckwheat.com. Appreciate you watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next video.